Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Journal, your quiet corner of the cosmos, where curiosity gently puts on its pajamas and settles in beside wonder. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Before we drift too far into the deep woods of thought, I have a question for you, a little ritual we share in this sleepy space. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy tonight's voyage, consider giving this video a gentle like and perhaps subscribing to the channel. It helps more sleepy minds find their way here. Now then, let's begin. Have you ever stood beneath the ancient canopy of a forest and felt, for a moment, that it was listening? That the rustle of leaves wasn't just wind, but language? That the stillness wasn't empty, but thoughtful, as if the trees themselves were dreaming slowly in the sunlight? Tonight, we're about to wander into that mystery. Because trees, as it turns out, are not what they seem. They breathe without lungs. They speak without voices. They remember without minds. I do hope this isn't so interesting that it keeps you awake. But if it does, well, at least you'll leave the forest knowing a little more about its secrets. So settle in, breathe slowly, and let the branches of thought reach gently around you. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Human Connection. There's something about trees that speaks to the deepest parts of us, something silent, yet familiar. We may not realize it, but the bond we share with forests is ancient, visceral, and profound. For as long as humans have existed, we've looked to trees not just for shelter and sustenance, but for symbolism, serenity, and spiritual meaning. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a tree. Not just any tree, your tree. Maybe it's the gnarled old maple from your childhood backyard, or the stately oak that loomed over your favorite park bench. Maybe it's a slender birch that danced silver in the wind, or a jacaranda spilling violet petals like confetti. Whatever it is, that image you're holding, it's more than wood and leaves. It's a vessel of memory. Trees live on a different time scale. They grow while we grow. They shade our play as children, stand beside our joys and heartbreaks, and often outlive us by centuries. They are, in a way, the quiet companions to our stories. Even in cities built of steel and glass, we seek them out, little pockets of green that remind us how to breathe again. There's something comforting in their silence. Unlike animals, trees don't flee or cry out. Unlike us, they do not rush. They simply stand. They endure. And in that stillness, there is presence, an unspoken kind of company. Have you ever noticed how sitting beneath a tree can quiet the noise inside your mind? As if the tree is offering you a piece of its calm? Biologically speaking, we owe a great deal to these leafy companions. They exhale what we inhale. We exhale what they inhale. In a sense, we're locked in a breathless dance, an invisible partnership that sustains us both. With every deep breath you take, somewhere, a tree is offering its life's work. And you, in turn, are feeding its need to grow. But this partnership goes deeper than biology. Across cultures and civilizations, trees have served as sacred symbols, bridges between heaven and earth, life and death, the seen and unseen. The ancient Celts revered the oak as a keeper of wisdom. The Norse imagined Yggdrasil, a colossal tree that held the 9 realms together. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the Bodhi tree is where enlightenment was found. Even the tree of life appears in the earliest chapters of many belief systems, as if humanity, in its search for meaning, has always reached for the branches. Children learn to climb before they learn to reason. Elders sit beneath trees to reflect on what was and what might be. We carve our names into their bark, hoping our love will endure as long as the tree does. We plant them to commemorate beginnings and endings, births, weddings, farewells. Trees are woven into our rituals, our songs, our stories. And then there is the awe. That quiet, humbling awe that wells up inside when you stand before a giant redwood or an ancient baobab. As if you're not looking at a plant, but a living monument to time itself. Some trees have lived through empires and extinctions. Some have seen the sky change more times than we can count. Their rings hold the memory of droughts and floods, of fires and frosts, living diaries written in circles. In recent years, science has begun to catch up with what poets and mystics have long suspected. That trees are not solitary beings, but part of vast, interconnected communities. We'll explore that deeper in later chapters. But for now, let us linger a bit longer on this first truth. That trees, in all their rooted quietness, reflect something vital about our own nature. Because perhaps what draws us to trees is not just their shade or their oxygen. Perhaps we recognize something of ourselves in them. The way they reach upward and outward, the way they bend in storms but often don't break, the way they hold their history quietly inside themselves. Just like us, trees are shaped by the seasons of their lives. They lose parts of themselves. They grow new ones. They weather what comes. They wait. They bloom. So the next time you pass a tree, even the smallest one swaying beside a roadside, take a breath. Listen. There is wisdom in its stillness. There is patience in its posture. And if you're quiet enough, you might just feel that old connection stir once again. In the chapters to come, we'll dive deeper into the astonishing science that now reveals just how intelligent, sensitive, and social trees truly are. But for now, rest here a while, with your roots deep in memory, and your mind gently reaching for the sun. Chapter 2. The History and Origins of Trees. Long before there were forests, before birdsong, before even the flutter of insect wings, the earth was a silent place. Its surface was raw and restless, shaped by fire and salt and stone. Life, in those ancient days, clung to the edges, in shallow seas, in mossy mats, in whispered green. But then, something miraculous took root. Around 470 million years ago, the first plants crept from the oceans onto land, tiny, primitive things, no taller than a whisper. Liverworts, mosses, and their kind. They had no roots, no leaves, no wood. But they had one crucial thing: chlorophyll, the gift of green, the ability to capture sunlight and turn it into life. From those fragile pioneers came everything that would follow. And among their descendants, a new kind of plant would emerge, one that would learn to grow up. By 385 million years ago, in the Devonian period, Earth saw its first true forests. These were not forests as we know them, not yet. The trees were strange and alien, tall ferns with fronds like feathers, and ancient relatives of club mosses that reached 30 feet into the air. Some had roots no deeper than your hand, yet they towered like titans. Their wood was crude, their bark thick and scale-like. But they stood, and that changed everything. With trunks came height. With height came shade. With shade came soil, and with soil came ecosystems. The first forests transformed the planet, chemically, physically, and even atmospherically. Trees inhaled carbon dioxide in vast amounts, exhaling oxygen, cooling the world. Their roots cracked open rocks and helped form rich, loamy ground. Their fallen trunks created homes for the first land-based creatures. And so forests became more than just collections of plants. They became architects of the land, shaping not only ecosystems, but the very climate of the planet. Fast forward through eons, to the Carboniferous period, some 300 million years ago. This was the golden age of trees. Swamps thick with towering lycopods and ancient conifers blanketed much of the land. These forests were so dense, so lush, that when their trees fell and were buried, they created the coal deposits we now mine today. The air was rich with oxygen. Insects grew huge. Dragonflies had wingspans wider than hawks. But change, as always, came. Shifting continents, changing climates, ice ages, extinctions, and with each shift, forests evolved. The mighty lycopods gave way to seed-bearing trees, gymnosperms like pines, firs, and cycads. Then, about 140 million years ago, something extraordinary bloomed, the flowering tree. Angiosperms, trees with blossoms, fruits, and colorful strategies for reproduction, exploded across the globe. Magnolias, willows, fig trees, oak and maple. Suddenly, forests were not only green but filled with scent and color and pollinating life. This flowering revolution would give rise to most of the tree species we now know today. It was in the shelter of these flowering forests that mammals emerged, that birds nested, that the earth as we know it began to take shape. And eventually, much, much later, humans would appear. At first, we lived within the forest, not beside it. We were just one of many species winding through trunks and underbrush, learning which plants healed, which trees bore fruit, which roots could be dug for food. In this way, the forest was our first teacher, our first map, our first mythology. Some of the earliest human dwellings were built from branches and bark. Our earliest fires kindled with fallen wood. Our oldest tools carved from tree limbs, our first medicines distilled from leaves and resins. Even our language is rooted in trees. The word book, after all, comes from beech, because early pages were carved into beechwood. The branches of knowledge, the roots of tradition, these are not metaphors by accident. They are memories of our literal beginnings. But as humanity grew and traveled, so too did our relationship with trees. We cleared forests to make way for cities. We harvested wood for ships, homes, and heat. Forests that once seemed infinite slowly receded into memory. Yet they never left us entirely. In the Amazon, some trees still bear the marks of human hands from over 2,000 years ago, species planted, shaped, or encouraged by ancient civilizations. In Europe, groves of oak and chestnut remain where sacred rituals once took place. In Africa and Asia, banyan trees stretch like living temples, still revered by local communities as places of spirit and silence. Even today, we continue to discover clues about the long, entangled history between trees and people. In pollen samples trapped in ice cores, in rings of petrified wood, in myths passed down through generations, all whispering the same truth, that we have always been children of the forest. But here's something even more humbling. Trees were here long before us. They shaped the air we breathe, the ground we walk on, the rain that falls from the sky. And unless we care for them, they may not be here long after us. Still, the forest remembers. It holds in its roots the DNA of the past, in its seeds the code for the future, and in every leaf that falls, a quiet promise that life, no matter how old or broken, can begin again. As we step into the next chapter, we'll leave the ancient past behind and enter the inner life of trees, exploring how they breathe, how they grow, and how a silent life can be anything but simple. Chapter 3: How Trees Breathe, the Science of Stillness. We often think of breath as the rise and fall of lungs, the steady inhale and exhale of a chest. But trees, ever the gentle contrarians, do not breathe as we do. They have no lungs, no muscles, no pulsing heart, and yet they are among the planet's greatest breathers. They inhale the invisible, exhale the essential, and do it all in a silence so complete we almost forget it's happening at all. Let's start with a question. What is breath, really? At its core, breath is the exchange of gases. Oxygen for carbon dioxide for oxygen. In animals like us, this exchange happens in the lungs. In trees, it happens in every green cell. The process is called photosynthesis, a soft and elegant word for a nearly miraculous feat with nothing but sunlight, water, and air. A tree transforms light into sugar, and in the process, releases oxygen. It is quite literally alchemy in slow motion. Here's how it works. Each leaf is a factory of light. On its surface are tiny pores called stomata, so small you'd need a microscope to see them. These stomata open and close throughout the day, like tiny mouths. When they open, carbon dioxide from the air slips in. Water, pulled up from the soil through roots and carried skyward by xylem tubes, reaches the leaves. Then the magic begins. Inside the leaf, within cells rich with chlorophyll, the pigment that makes leaves green, sunlight triggers a transformation. Carbon dioxide and water are rearranged into glucose, a simple sugar that fuels the tree's growth. And the byproduct? Oxygen. Clean, breathable oxygen that escapes back into the atmosphere through those same tiny pores. A single mature tree can release enough oxygen to support 2 human beings, and forests, collectively, create about 28% of the oxygen in our atmosphere. The rest comes mostly from oceanic phytoplankton, but that's a sleepy sea story for another night. But trees don't just give us air to breathe. They breathe in their own way, too. Not just during the day, but at night, too, through a quieter, more mysterious process called cellular respiration. You see, trees also need energy. And they get it by breaking down the sugars they've made during the day. Just like us, they burn this fuel in their cells using oxygen, releasing carbon dioxide as a result. That's why, at night, trees actually take in oxygen and give off a bit of carbon dioxide. But don't worry, the balance is still beautifully in our favor. Their daylight photosynthesis far outweighs their nocturnal respiration. And here's something even more enchanting. Trees don't just passively breathe. They actively manage their breath. When drought strikes, they can close their stomata to conserve water, even if it means taking in less carbon dioxide. When the sun is too bright, some trees turn their leaves slightly away, shading themselves like slow-moving dancers avoiding a spotlight. Even water, that most essential of tree resources, is part of their breath. Through a process called transpiration, trees release water vapor into the air through their leaves, sometimes hundreds of gallons a day. This not only cools the tree, it also helps draw more water upward from the roots, like a natural siphon. And collectively, it cools entire regions, feeds clouds, and shapes weather systems. Yes, trees help make rain. In the Amazon, for example, forests are not just passive sponges, they are engines of moisture. Through transpiration, Billions of trees help generate clouds that drift westward, watering distant lands. When large parts of a forest are lost, rainfall patterns change. Not just locally, but thousands of miles away. A tree's breath, then, becomes a kind of whisper that travels the world. But even beyond gas exchange and water vapor, trees breathe in other subtle ways. Their trunks swell and contract with temperature and humidity. Their leaves open and close in slow circadian rhythms. Their roots pulse with the uptake of nutrients. And some recent studies suggest trees even make faint sounds, pops and crackles inside their xylem, as water moves upward. Not quite a heartbeat, but something close. There's also another beautiful irony. The very carbon dioxide that we release through breath, fire, and industry becomes the food that trees use to grow. In their vast wooden bodies, trees store carbon not just from our time, but from centuries past. Each ring of a tree is a breath held in solid form, a memory of air. Some ancient trees, still alive today, began storing carbon before humans even knew what carbon was. They have lived through our empires and eras, breathing steadily all the while, binding sky to soil, day to night, and past to future. And so, when you walk through a forest, you are not walking through stillness. You are walking through breath, through invisible rivers of gas and vapor, through an exchange so vast and quiet, it might take a lifetime to truly hear it. We breathe the forest, and the forest breathes us. In the next chapter, we'll explore something even more mysterious, how trees talk. Because yes, the forest has a language. And it's time we learn how to listen. Chapter 4. The Language of Trees, How Forests Communicate Beneath Our Feet. We tend to think of forests as still, silent, solitary. Each tree a separate being, growing upward in quiet isolation. But beneath the leaves, beyond the bark, something extraordinary is happening. Something that scientists only recently began to understand. Because forests are not collections of individuals. They are networks, communities, families. And yes, they talk, but not in words or sounds. Their language is chemical, electrical, fungal. It flows not through air, but through soil. And it's happening right now beneath your feet. Let's start with the roots. A tree's roots are more than anchors. They are feelers, messengers, lifelines. They reach out into the earth, twisting and turning, searching not only for water and minerals, but for contact. When they find another root, from their own kind, or even from a different species, they often connect. Sometimes they fuse. Sometimes they exchange signals. Sometimes they warn. But the real magic begins when fungi enter the scene. Underground, interwoven with the roots of nearly every tree, lies an ancient alliance, a partnership so old it predates the dinosaurs. It's called mycorrhiza, from the Greek myko, fungus, and rhiza, root. In this relationship, fungal threads called hyphae wrap around or even enter tree roots, forming vast, intricate webs known as mycelium. This mycelial network, often called the Wood Wide Web, acts like a living internet. Through it, trees can send and receive information. Carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, chemical alerts, electrical pulses, even memory. Imagine a forest after an insect attack. A tree, under siege by hungry beetles, releases distress signals, volatile chemicals into the air and warning compounds into the soil. Nearby trees, connected through the fungal network, receive these messages and begin producing defensive chemicals in their leaves, sometimes before the insects even arrive. They're not just reacting, they're preparing. They are, in a sense, listening. And the mycorrhizal fungi? They're not just messengers. They're caretakers, too. In exchange for sugars from the tree, energy produced through photosynthesis, they provide nutrients from the soil. Phosphorus, potassium, water. They extend the reach of a tree's root system by miles. They are the quiet architects of forest health. But this web isn't purely transactional. It's cooperative. Trees don't only support themselves, they support each other. In fact, older, larger trees, sometimes called mother trees, have been shown to share resources with younger saplings, especially their own offspring. When light is scarce and a seedling struggles to grow, mother trees will funnel carbon through the fungal network to help it survive. Like a whispered lullaby carried underground. In times of drought, trees can shift nutrients towards struggling neighbors. In times of abundance, they give freely. In times of illness, they warn. These are not the actions of mindless plants. These are signs of a system built not on dominance, but on connection. And this isn't limited to a single species. Birch and fir, for example, very different kinds of trees, have been shown to exchange carbon through shared fungal networks. In autumn, as birch leaves fall and photosynthesis slows, fir trees take on the extra nutrients. In spring, when the firs are shaded and sleepy, the birches give back. It's a seasonal symbiosis, a kind of forest bookkeeping where generosity keeps the whole alive. Even in death, trees don't stop giving. When a tree is dying, whether from old age, fire, or disease, it will often send a final surge of nutrients into its neighbors, as if passing the torch. And even after the trunk falls and the roots decay, the fungi remain, carrying echoes of that tree's life to the next generation. But like any system, this communication network is vulnerable. When forests are fragmented by roads, logging, or monoculture farming, the underground networks suffer. Trees become isolated. The web phrase. The forest loses its voice. And here's something stranger still. Some scientists now believe that forests may have memory. Not memory in the way humans do, but adaptive memory. Trees that survive droughts seem better equipped to handle them in the future, and through the fungal network, they can pass that resilience on. Young trees raised in the company of elders show greater resistance to stress, suggesting that something, some signal, some wisdom, is being shared. The forest, then, is not just a place of photosynthesis and shade. It is a living, breathing, communicating organism. A superorganism, where the roots are neurons, the fungi are synapses, and the whole system pulses with life, thought, and quiet decision. We tend to admire trees for their solitude, but maybe it's time we admired them for their society, for their cooperation, for their ancient, wordless way of taking care of each other. And if you ever feel alone, truly alone, find a tree. Sit with it. Remember that you're standing above a vast, invisible city of life. That just as the forest listens to itself, it might, in its own slow way, be listening to you too. In our next chapter, we'll explore an even deeper mystery. How trees grow, from tiny seeds to towering giants, and how every ring, every branch, holds a story. Chapter 5, Rings of Time, the Architecture and Memory of Growth. Growth in trees is not a sprint or a burst, it's a slow unfolding. A quiet layering of time. A symphony composed one cell at a time, one season at a time. It's patient, deliberate, and astonishingly precise. To look at a towering tree, a redwood, a baobab, an old chestnut in the park, is to witness a masterpiece written in wood. But what does it mean to grow when you're rooted in place? How does a tree know when to stretch, when to thicken, when to rest? It all begins with a seed, a simple vessel, no larger than a pebble, yet carrying within it the blueprint for a living cathedral. Each seed contains the genetic code, the initial burst of energy, and the raw potential to become something far larger than itself. Sunlight may spark the change, but the story starts deep within. When a seed lands in fertile ground, not too wet, not too cold, just enough light, it begins the first sacred act, germination. A tiny root pushes downward, anchoring itself into the soil. Then a shoot pushes upward, breaking through the surface, reaching for light. From this moment on, a tree begins its lifelong balancing act, reaching down for water and minerals, up for sunlight and air. It divides its energy between what's visible and what's hidden, what grows in the dark and what grows in the sky. Roots and branches, mirror images above and below. But what determines how tall a tree grows, or how thick its trunk becomes? The answer lies in the delicate, living tissue just beneath the bark, the cambium. The cambium is the quiet engine of growth, a thin layer of cells wrapped around the trunk, branches, and roots. Each year, this layer creates new wood inward and new bark outward. In spring, when water is plentiful and the tree is full of energy, the cambium produces large, fast-growing cells, light in color and low in density. As summer wanes and growth slows, it makes smaller, denser cells, darker and tougher. This seasonal rhythm produces the rings you see in a cross-section of a tree. Each ring is a year of life, a memory, a fingerprint of the conditions that shaped it. Wide rings mark years of abundance, rain, warmth, light. Narrow rings show hardship, drought, disease, cold. Together, they form a timeline stretching backward into forgotten centuries. Some trees wear these rings for thousands of years. The oldest known living tree, a bristlecone pine named Methuselah, is over 4,800 years old. That means it began growing before the pyramids were built, before writing was invented, before most of human history was even a whisper. But rings do more than mark age, they hold information. Scientists, through the field of dendrochronology, can read the rings like pages in a diary. Ancient droughts, volcanic eruptions, wildfires, even solar activity, all leave their signatures in the width, color, and density of a tree's rings. In this way, trees are not just growing, they are recording. They are historians rooted in place, archiving the climate and rhythm of life around them. The wood holds memory. Not conscious memory, perhaps, but cellular memory. Memory in shape and pattern. And then there is the architecture of growth, the way a tree chooses where to grow. Every leaf, every twig, every fork in a branch follows a logic. Trees grow toward light, a process known as phototropism. When light is blocked on one side, growth shifts to the other. Roots, meanwhile, follow gravity, gravitropism, anchoring and exploring downward. But they also shift direction based on moisture and nutrients, sniffing through the soil in slow motion. And then there's thigmomorphogenesis, a tongue twister of a word that means trees respond to touch. When wind rocks a sapling or an animal brushes against a branch, the tree senses pressure and strengthens itself accordingly. This is why trees on windswept coasts are squat and sturdy, while those in calm, protected valleys grow tall and slender. Even competition shapes growth. In crowded forests, trees race upward, investing energy into a single tall trunk with few branches. In open meadows, they sprawl wide and full, basking in light from every direction. A tree learns its environment, not with eyes or ears, but with a deep awareness of space, stress, and season. And trees remember this stress. Saplings that have been shaken by wind, buffeted by weather, or nibbled by animals often grow more resilient. They adapt. They reinforce. They carry that shaping forward. In this way, a tree's form, its bends, scars, twists, and thickness, tells a story of survival. But even as they grow, trees know when to rest. In temperate regions, trees go dormant in winter. Their metabolism slows. Leaves fall. The cambium sleeps. It's a kind of hibernation, a pause in the music before spring plays the next movement. This rest isn't failure, it's wisdom. Growth without pause is chaos. Even the oldest trees know when to be still. And yet, growth is not always upward. Some trees send new shoots sideways. Some send suckers underground to rise again nearby. Some clone themselves, forming vast, ancient groves like the trembling pando, a forest of quaking aspen in Utah that is technically one organism, over 100 acres in size, and more than 80,000 years old. One root, countless trunks, a single living memory of time. So when you walk through a forest, you're not just seeing trees, you're seeing the shape of years, the accumulation of weather and waiting, of storms endured and light reached for. Every gnarled branch, every hollow trunk is a decision, a sacrifice, a memory. We often ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? But perhaps the better question, the tree's question, is, what do you want to become through your growing? Because growth is not only about size. It's about shape. It's about what you carry, what you learn, what you leave behind. In our next chapter, we'll dive into one of the most stunning mysteries of all. How trees remember, without a brain, without neurons, without a nervous system. How they learn, adapt, and carry wisdom from generation to generation. Chapter 6. Memory without a mind, the intelligence of trees. When we speak of intelligence, we often think of speed, quick decisions, fast reactions, electric sparks firing across a brain. But trees offer a different kind of wisdom. One that doesn't race, but waits. One that doesn't speak, but responds. A wisdom built not in milliseconds, but in seasons and centuries. How, we might ask, can a tree be intelligent? It has no eyes, no ears, no brain. It does not move. It does not think in any way we recognize. And yet, science is beginning to reveal something quietly astonishing. Trees remember, trees learn, and trees make decisions. Let's begin with memory. Not memory as humans experience it. No images, no recollections, but something simpler, more cellular. In 2008, scientists conducted an experiment with a group of young poplar trees. They exposed them to drought, limiting their water supply, and observed how the trees responded. As expected, the trees closed their stomata, reduced their growth, and conserved moisture. But what was surprising came the following year. Even when water was plentiful again, the trees remained cautious. They closed their stomata more quickly. They remembered the drought, not with conscious thought, but with an internal shift in behavior. A kind of physiological memory stored not in a brain, but in their very cells. This kind of epigenetic memory, where experiences alter how genes are expressed, is increasingly found in plants. When trees endure stress, whether it be drought, frost, or insect attack, they often respond more effectively the next time. Their cells learn how to react. Even more astonishing, some of these lessons can be passed down to the next generation, encoded into seeds or suckers. Survival handed forward. Then there's learning, the ability to change behavior based on experience. In one experiment, biologist Monica Gagliano studied the Mimosa pudica, a plant known for folding its leaves when touched. She dropped the plants gently, repeatedly, from a short height. At first, the mimosa folded its leaves tightly in response. But after several repetitions, it stopped. It had learned that the stimulus wasn't harmful. When she tested the same plants weeks later, they still remembered. They no longer responded to the drop. The behavior had changed. The lesson had stayed. Trees, too, show signs of this slow, careful learning. A tree that experiences early frost may delay leaf budding the next spring. A sapling growing in strong winds will alter its structure, strengthening its core, shortening its reach. These are not reflexes. They are adjustments. They are choices. But how can such decisions be made without a brain? It turns out that trees, and plants more broadly, are wired in their own way. Not with nerves, but with electrical signaling systems that transmit information through their tissues. When a leaf is damaged, electrical impulses travel down to the roots and out to other leaves. The response is coordinated. Defensive chemicals are produced. Growth is altered. The system somehow knows. And then there's the forest-wide memory, the communal intelligence we explored earlier in the fungal networks. Through these vast mycorrhizal webs, trees share not only nutrients, but information. A forest that's experienced disease or drought becomes more resilient. Not because each tree is alone, but because the network remembers. Like neurons in a shared brain, each root and fungus and branch is a part of the greater pattern. Some scientists argue that forests function as superorganisms, collective intelligences made of many parts. Like a coral reef or a beehive. No single brain, no single thought, but together, a system that can sense, respond, adapt, and even warn. We must be careful here, of course. Trees are not people. They do not dream or imagine. But they are far more than passive background. They are aware, in ways we're only beginning to understand. They are aware of light, not just its presence, but its quality, its angle, its duration. Some trees can detect even minute changes in sunlight across the year, adjusting their growth patterns, flowering times, and chemical compositions accordingly. They are aware of gravity, of moisture, of damage. Some trees emit ultrasonic sounds, tiny pops, when they are dehydrated, perhaps as a distress signal. Some release pheromones into the air when attacked, warning nearby plants of danger. Others produce toxins or bitter compounds in their leaves, a chemical message that says, "We are under attack. Be ready." And all of this happens without movement, without words, without brainwaves. It happens in silence, in stillness. This challenges our definition of intelligence. Must thinking be fast to be real? Must memory be spoken to be meaningful? Consider this. A tree can live for thousands of years. It can survive storms, fires, plagues, and droughts. It can remember seasons, learn from hardship, and adapt to its changing world. Is that not a kind of wisdom? And what might it mean for us to slow down enough to witness it? To measure time in rings, not hours? To think in centuries, not minutes? Because if the forest is intelligent in its own patient, earthy way, then maybe there's something for us to learn here. Not just about trees, but about time, about resilience, about how to listen without needing to speak. In the next chapter, we'll journey outward from the roots and trunks to one of the most mysterious parts of a tree's life, its relationships with other species. Birds, insects, mammals, even humans. We'll explore how trees feed, shelter, and co-evolve with the living world around them. Chapter 7. Trees and their allies, life among the branches. Imagine a tree not just as a singular being, but as an ecosystem, a vertical city, teeming with life. Its trunk is a tower. Its leaves, 1,000 roofs. Its roots, a subway of moisture and memory. A tree may seem solitary, but in truth, it's never alone. It's a home, a partner, a guardian, a node in the living web. Start with the soil. A tree's roots don't just drink, they host. Nestled among their tendrils are microbes, bacteria, and fungi. Some of these creatures help the tree absorb nutrients. Some detoxify the soil, Others form alliances that go back millions of years. Each rootlet becomes a gathering place for life, a handshake in the dark. Above the roots, in the crevices of bark, another world unfolds. Tiny spiders, mosses, ants, and beetles nestle into the folds. For many, bark is not just surface, it's shelter. Birds peck at it for grubs. Lichen paints it in quiet greens and silvers. Some trees, like cork oaks, develop armor so thick that it can be harvested and regrown without harm. Even protection becomes part of the dance. Climb higher, into the canopy. Here, in the whispering leaves, a riot of life blooms. Birds flit from branch to branch, feeding, singing, nesting. Squirrels leap like acrobats. Monkeys in tropical forests swing from vines. And in the stillness, tiny caterpillars and insects nibble on leaves, pollinate flowers, and begin the chain of life all over again. A single oak can support hundreds of species. A rainforest fig might be home to thousands. Each tree, depending on its species, structure, and age, offers a different world, a different stage on which life plays out its story. But the relationship isn't one-sided. Trees don't merely host life. They interact with it. They are shaped by it. They co-evolve. Take, for example, the humble acacia and the fierce little ant. In the African savanna, some species of acacia have hollow thorns, perfect nests for ants. In return, the ants protect the tree. They swarm and bite when giraffes come to browse, or when other insects try to invade. Some even trim away vines or competing plants. The tree feeds them with sweet nectar. The ants guard its branches. A living pact. Or consider the figure. Its relationship with the fig wasp is so precise, so specialized, that one cannot reproduce without the other. A female wasp enters a fig, a strange inverted flower, to lay her eggs and pollinate the fig in the process. When her young hatch, they exit the fruit, carrying pollen to the next figure. It's an ancient ritual, a partnership written in wings and sweetness. Even predators and parasites have their place. Some trees welcome bats and birds of prey, who help control populations of leaf-eating insects. Some attract bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds with blossoms designed to fit their tongues or legs like keys in a lock. The colors, shapes, and scents of flowers are not accidental. They're invitations. Codes. Songs that only the right creature can hear. And yes, humans, too, have long been tree allies. We've depended on them not just for wood and warmth, but for pollination, medicine, food, and culture. The apple tree gave us both fruit and metaphor. The olive tree offered oil, peace, and endurance. The cacao tree gave us chocolate. The willow gave us salicin, the first aspirin. The birch tapped for syrup. The cedar burned in ceremony. Even the pine tree, with its cones and needles, gave us the scent of memory. We have shaped trees through selective breeding, creating sweeter fruits, straighter trunks, showier blossoms. In return, they've traveled the world with us. Orchards, groves, and bonsai gardens are signs not just of agriculture, but of affection. We haven't just used trees, we've lived with them. And in recent years, we've begun to reawaken to how deeply these partnerships matter. Cities are planting more trees to cool streets and soothe minds. Scientists are preserving ancient species. Ecologists are restoring forests not only for the trees, but for the creatures who call them home. Because when a tree is lost, it's not just the trunk that vanishes. It's 1,000 tiny homes, 100 songbirds, a web of pollinators, a mosaic of interactions. Every hollow is a nest, every branch a path, every leaf a platform for a world. And some trees go even further. In tropical rainforests, giant kapok and ceiba trees tower above the canopy like skyscrapers. Their branches hold not just animals, but entire gardens, orchids, mosses, bromeliads, even miniature forests. These epiphytes live on the tree without harming it, using its height to gather light. The host tree becomes a mountain, an ecosystem on an ecosystem. But even small trees do their part. A dogwood in a backyard might feed bees in spring, shade toads in summer, and offer berries to migrating birds in fall. A single sapling, barely taller than your knees, might already be a cafe for insects, a perch for a sparrow, a playground for a child. To see a tree clearly is to see its companions. To see its network, not just underground but in the air. Trees are not isolated towers, they are hubs in the fabric of life. So the next time you see a tree, don't just look up. Look around. Look closely. Listen to the bird song. Watch the flicker of wings. Touch the bark. Smell the resin. There's a story unfolding there, one of connection, shelter, and interdependence. In the next chapter, we'll shift our gaze toward the horizon, into the future of forests. What challenges do trees face? What can science, and all of us, do to protect their ancient wisdom? Chapter 8. The Future Forest, Threats, Hope, and the Path Forward. Forests have stood for hundreds of millions of years. They've witnessed the rise and fall of continents, the birth of rivers, the flight of birds, the footprints of early humans. They have survived ice ages and firestorms, droughts and floods. But now, in the age of humans, the Anthropocene, the balance is shifting faster than ever before. And the trees are struggling to keep up. Today, the world loses an estimated 10 million hectares of forest every year. That's about one soccer field of forest vanishing every second. In some places, it's slash-and-burn clearing for cattle or soy. In others, it's illegal logging, mining, or expanding cities. The causes vary, but the pattern is the same. Ancient, living ecosystems are being replaced with roads, monocultures, concrete. When a forest falls, we don't just lose wood. We lose a network, a climate buffer, a carbon sink, a home. We lose songs that haven't been sung in 1,000 years, medicines undiscovered, wisdom unmeasured. And with deforestation comes a cascade of consequences. Carbon dioxide, once stored in trunks and soil, is released back into the atmosphere, accelerating climate change. Local temperatures rise. Rainfall patterns shift. Rivers run dry. Animals lose habitat and species vanish, many before they're even known to science. Indigenous communities lose not only shelter, but culture, language, and identity. But climate change itself also turns the world against the trees. Rising temperatures stress forests in unexpected ways. In many regions, trees bloom too early, only to be hit by late frosts. Others face longer droughts and hotter summers, making them more vulnerable to pests and fire. In the past, forests evolved alongside fire. Some trees, like the lodgepole pine, even depend on fire to open their cones. But now, fires come faster, hotter, more frequent. Fueled by heat waves and dried wood, they scorch not just undergrowth, but entire canopies, leaving behind landscapes that struggle to recover. And pests, like the bark beetle, are thriving in this warmer world. Without cold winters to keep them in check, they reproduce faster, spreading through vast forests like tiny, relentless armies. Trees, weakened by heat and drought, are less able to defend themselves. So the threats are many. But the forest is not without allies. Around the world, scientists, activists, indigenous communities, and ordinary citizens are fighting to protect what remains and restore what has been lost. Some efforts are local and rooted in tradition. In the Amazon, for example, indigenous groups like the Ashaninka and the Yawanawa manage their territories using knowledge passed down through generations, preserving biodiversity while defending their rights. Other efforts are high-tech and global. Satellite mapping, drones, and artificial intelligence are helping scientists detect illegal logging, monitor forest health, and plan restoration projects with stunning precision. There's also growing awareness of reforestation, the planting of trees to restore degraded land. Massive campaigns are underway, from India to Africa to Central America. The Great Green Wall Initiative in the Sahel aims to plant a wall of trees across the southern edge of the Sahara, restoring land, sequestering carbon, and supporting livelihoods. But reforestation must be done with care. Planting trees is not always a solution, especially if it replaces native ecosystems with fast-growing monocultures. Real restoration means planting the right trees in the right places and allowing the natural web of life, soil, fungi, insects, animals to reweave itself. Beyond planting, we are also learning to listen. Scientists studying tree communication, stress signaling, and fungal partnerships are rethinking forestry from the ground up. Some now advocate for perforestation, letting old-growth forests grow undisturbed, maximizing their carbon storage and biodiversity. And perhaps most importantly, we are learning to see forests not just as resources, but as relationships, as living communities, as teachers. What if, instead of managing forests like crops, we partnered with them like kin? What if we looked at trees not just as carbon machines, but as elders, as beings who've endured for millennia and still have something to show us, about patience, resilience, and the beauty of interdependence? Hope lies not in a single breakthrough, but in many small acts. A child planting her first sapling. A farmer allowing native species to regrow. A city choosing to preserve its ancient grove. A teacher explaining how roots communicate. A viewer, maybe even you, beginning to care. Forests do not need saving in the way a drowning person does. What they need is room, time, respect, and allies. Because if we let them, if we step back just enough, forests will return. Life will return. The planet will heal slowly, just as it always has, from the ground up. And we'll know it's working when we feel cool air on a summer day, when the bird song gets louder, when the soil under our feet feels spongy with life again, when a child looks up at a tall tree and doesn't see wood or profit or carbon offset, but wonder. In our final chapter, we'll drift back from the forest into the self and ask, what do trees mean to us? Why do they comfort us? What ancient longing do they speak to in our hearts? We'll explore the spiritual and symbolic power of trees and how, in many ways, they remind us of ourselves. Chapter 9, The Soul of the Tree, What They Teach Us About Being Human. There's something about trees that draws us in. Maybe it's their stillness, maybe their shape, or maybe deep down, it's because they mirror something in us, something we can't quite name. We sit beneath them. We carve our names into their bark. We plant them to honor births and mourn deaths. We decorate them in winter. We write poems about them in spring. And when we're lost, we instinctively look for them, tall and unmoving, like sentinels of the soul. But why? What is it that makes a tree feel sacred? Perhaps it begins with presence. Trees don't rush. They don't chase or flee. They are, in every moment, entirely where they are. This kind of being, rooted, observant, slow, is rare in the human world, where movement is often mistaken for meaning. Trees remind us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay. They also remind us of resilience. A tree withstands storms, wind, fire. It may bend, it may break, but given time, it often heals. It regrows. Its wounds become part of its character, not hidden but exposed. A scar in the bark, a lightning-shaped hollow, a branch that reaches awkwardly but still reaches. And that's something deeply human, not perfection, but endurance. The ability to be shaped by struggle and still rise, still stretch toward the light. Trees also listen, not with ears, but with openness. They take in what's around them, sunlight, rain, the chatter of birds, the movement of air, and they respond. Not dramatically, but with grace. A slow turn, a deeper root, a blossom when it's time. How often do we forget to do this? To be receptive, patient, attuned. Trees show us how to be in conversation with the world, not dominating it, not ignoring it, but participating in it with quiet reverence. Then there's the way trees connect, both above and below the surface. As we've seen, they share nutrients, send warnings, support the young, and even help the dying pass their last gifts onward. In this way, they echo our own human longing, to be seen, to be held, to be part of something greater than ourselves. In mythology and religion, trees often stand at the center of the story. In Norse legend, the Yggdrasil is a great world tree, its branches connecting the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. In the Bible, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge hold the origins of choice, curiosity, and consequence. In Buddhism, the Buddha finds enlightenment beneath a Bodhi tree, in stillness, under its shade. Even in dreams, trees often appear as symbols of growth, of protection, of ancestry. A family tree, a life path, a place of transformation. And maybe that's what moves us most. The fact that trees grow without ambition, but not without purpose. They don't chase the sun, they lean into it. They don't rush upward, they grow toward something, always in dialogue with the world around them. They teach us how to grow slowly, give generously, stand firmly, and let go gracefully. Because in autumn, when the leaves fall, the tree does not mourn. It simply lets go, and trusts that spring will come again. To be human is to forget these truths, and to come back to them, again and again. That's why we need trees. Not just in our environment, but in our imaginations. Not just for oxygen, but for orientation. They show us who we are when we remember how to be. So maybe the soul of the tree is not separate from ours. Maybe it's something shared, something passed between breath and bark, between silence and story. And maybe, just maybe, every time we pause beneath a tree, something ancient in us listens. Something wordless remembers. And so, fellow traveler, tonight we've wandered deep into the secret life of trees, from seeds and sap to root and sky. We've discovered how trees breathe and talk, how they grow and remember, how they nurture life and hold the past. But perhaps what's most magical is this. that trees are not only mirrors of nature, but mirrors of ourselves. In their strength, their stillness, their quiet care for one another, they remind us of who we once were and who we could be again. So now, as your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts soften, I'll ask again, just as I did when we began. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? And if you enjoyed drifting through the forest with me, consider leaving a like or subscribing for more sleepy science. But for now, let's rest. Sleep well, fellow traveler. Good night.